Good morning, everybody. I think I mentioned it on Friday. I was kind of having the congestion, so still feeling it today. When they burn sugar cane around my house every year, I get the chit as we call it. But we're gonna push through, and hopefully you can hear me. I will speak up a little closer to the to the computer to make sure you guys can hear me. Remember, guys, this class is meant to, I say simplify, but bring things back to basics so that we can be all on the same page of how we communicate human emotion. It's all about kind of learning a new language, but being consistent so that we can discuss and not have any confusions. So, what we're going to start off with today, our series on the ankle and subtalar, and then we're going to segue to the knee is the concept of pronation and supination. Because a lot of you have heard pronation and supination in terms of foot pronating, supinating. Sometimes that can kind of be confusing. And so what I want to start off with is something we're familiar with, and that's the prone and supine position of our body. Like if you were supine, you'd be like facing, like laying down on your back. If you were prone, you'd be face down, right? We all kind of familiar with that, a supine position. So think of standing up. Supine, sound horrible today. Supine would be like facing forward. Prone would be like facing back. One of the reasons that makes this confusing is because in anatomical position, the back of our hand, the dorsum of our hand is facing back, and the face, this is our face of our hand. Fingernails are kind of like the hair at the back and face. So in a supine position, for our radial ulnar joints, we're facing forward. Our feet, the face is actually on the ground. The back is on the top. So that's kind of weird because our feet are kind of at a right angle. It doesn't match up perfectly with our hands. So the concept that I'd like for you to think about is if Ken was going to go into a supine position, face up, that's what we would refer to as supination. And if Ken was to go prone, face down, that's what we call pronation. I'm going to get to how that makes sense with the transverse and subtalar joints, but it'll also come into play when we talk about pronation, supination of our radial ulnar. The act, literally the act of going prone and the act of going supine. Okay. You don't have to answer this because the video won't show it, but how many people sleep on their tummies, like face down? Okay. Everybody put their hand up. How many people sleep on their backs or supine? Okay. Nobody put their hand up. And some of you, like me, we let the fates decide. I mean, we start off in one position, next thing you know. So what I'd like for you to think about is some of you, I'm one of those some of yous, will wedge a pillow. I have to sleep like this, but I'll wedge a pillow on one side. So like I'm sleeping on my side, but I'm kind of like sleeping on one side, but there's a pillow wedged into me. That's kind of how the subtalar transverse dorsal joints are. So check this out. The foot is facing down. However, it's not flat. It's not facing down like we would be laying straight down. There's an arch to it, created by the bones and ligaments and plantar fascia, which is like the bowstring. Kind of cool. Like you think about a bow being straight until you string it and it creates an arch. So your plantar fascia is like a bowstring that goes from your heels to your metatarsals. And when you bow it, it helps create that arch. So in other words, the foot is face down, but it's not perfectly flat. It's like literally on the medial side, having a pillow wedged in. So when we talk about pronation of the tarsal bones, it's as if you go from being more arched to being more flat. You go more into a prone position.
And when you supinate the subtalar, you roll more on your back. Now, you're never going to get all the way on your back, right? Unlike this one. But it's the act of going more supine or more prone, more face forward or less face forward, which would be like rolling on your back. Does that make sense? This is where it gets a little bit confusing. She's got to fight there. Got to fight there. You guys don't pay good money to have me stay home. Supination of your subtalar joint is going to mimic the same movements as inversion. And pronation of your subtalar joint is going to mimic the same motions as eversion. That messes with us a little bit because it's closed chain. Because it's one of those illusions. But if we take what we learned last week, medial gets closer to medial for the inversion, and lateral gets closer to lateral for the eversion. So if you did that experiment on the floor, you would notice that if you had a high arch, if you went more supine, like you were rolling more on your back, less on your tongue, more on your back, you notice the medial would get closer to your medial. This is my right arm. And if you pronate or go more face to face, you'll notice the lateral gets closer to your left. So I wanted to make those connections that a closed chain inversion is going to be a supination, and a closed chain pronation is going to be an eversion. Sometimes those things can kind of be a little tricky. Does that make sense? Literally, act of going supine or the act of going prone. On the first test, we emphasized the difference between rights and lefts. And today, before I get into the knee, I think this is going to help, because knee rotation can get confusing with this. Today, I want to discuss the sides of sides. So what I mean by that is things we don't really think about. We have a right arm and we have a left arm. We have a right ear, we have a left ear, we have a right leg, we have a left leg. But our right side has sides, and our left side has sides. But what we can't do is we can't say the right of my right, because that's a different place than the right of my left. It's a different structure. So we take this mirror concept that I introduced you on Friday, and we say the outside of my right has the same structure as the outside of my left, and we call that the lateral side. The inside of my left has the same structure as the inside of my right. We call it the medial side. So medial and lateral, it's really kind of neat. It's just the sides of sides with a mirror effect in place. So think about this. If I tell Ken, I'm going to do it where we understand, we have a lot of background knowledge that I'm going to apply to the side of us. Hey, Ken, do a front roll or a front flip, no problem. Back flip, no problem. Ken, do a cartwheel to your right side. Ken's probably going to do something like this. To your left side. Hey, Ken, spin to your right. Or if we ask a child, spin to your right, they would probably chase their right arm and spin to the right. Spin to the left. Going somewhere with this. But does that make sense? Now, what if Ken was not Ken as a person with the right and left side? Ken is now my arm or my hip. So now his right side is his lateral side. His now Ken is a femur. And his left side is a medial side. If I ask Ken the same question, he wouldn't understand. Hey, Ken, spin to your right side. He's like, dude, I don't have a right side. I am a right. So I need to substitute right and left with lateral and medial. Hey, Ken, spin laterally. Spin laterally. Hey, Ken, spin medially. Same concept. Mirror effect. Hey, Ken, spin laterally. Spin medially. And those words are synonymous with externally, internally. It's the same concept, sides of sides. I give you that story because the implications are freaky. If we don't have the context, pre-story. So what do we know about our knee? This is where you want to write it down, but it's in your notes, it's in your packet that I gave. The knee is a modified hinge. It's mostly hinge. It's tricked out. It has some modification to it. Somebody every place in my view. Let's see. I'm trying to get stir. So what do we call it a modified? Because the hinge in the knee, which we're familiar with in the fetal flexion extension, bilateral axis all. But if our knee didn't do this, when our knee is flexed, I'm going to explain the whys, but our knee allows some rotation. When our knee's planted in the ground, the lower leg isn't going to go anywhere. It's our femur that moves. If we didn't allow this rotation, when we would cut and plant and torque our knee, we'd have a lot more ligament damage. So we still can. It would be a lot worse. We have to give a little. We have to give some play. Just like tall skyscrapers have to sway, it's like big sturdy trees have to sway. Our knee has to give a little because of all the torsion that we put on our knee. The coming together of the two longest bones, cutting and planting, there's a lot of torsion. And if our knee didn't rotate a little bit, we'd have more knee. We already have a lot of knee. So before we get into the motions, I'm going to explain how. So when your knee is in anatomical locked out, y'all have heard of that before, right? When you're in the heat, anybody in the marching band? I was a saxophone player back in the day. And they'd always say, don't lock out your knees. Some people would pass out. But that's a true statement. When your knees are extended or in anatomical, there's a mechanism called the screw home mechanism. Anybody ever hear about that before? Basically what it is your knees, these condyles kind of lock into place. You have these collateral ligaments. I've heard about that, the MCL and the LCL, medial lateral, collateral ligaments. And this mechanism is meant to allow your bone to rest on your bone in a rigid, solid place to save your muscles from having to do it for you. Like, think of it as efficiency. There's no way you could flex your knees a little bit and stand like this all day and your legs would get tired. But imagine if you can lock those bones in place. And now you have bone resting on bone. You can save your quads and your other muscles from having to support you. In biomechanics, I'm going to teach you a specific muscle that unlocks your knee. Called the popliteus. I remember it like Pablo. I'll learn about those things in biomechanics. So when your knee is locked into place, your knee doesn't allow any rotation. Your knee rotates while you're in anatomical. That's what we call a bad day. It's a bad day. We don't want our knee to rotate. We want it to be locked into place. We want it to be screwed home for efficiency. However, watch this. When we flex our knee, we unlock it. The collateral ligaments, which are slightly posterior, get put on slack. We unlock the condyles, and the knee can allow rotation. Whether it looks like it's moving, and it is, or it looks like it's not moving, it's not. I mean, it is. In other words, tibia can rotate about femur, or femur can move about tibia. Now, guys, I'm not talking about possessed Annabelle doll. Just a little bit, but it's an important little bit. Right? Here are the motions. Obviously, we got flexion and extension down. You guys see these bumps? These are tibial tuberosities. It's where my quad tendon pulls on my tibia. Mine used to be out to about there, like a Pinocchio on my knees. Is that Osgood-Schlager's disease. This is part of my tibia. I want you to notice how it moves when I rotate my knees. It's because my tibias are rotating. Your brain wants to go to your foot. I'm not saying your foot can't move. That's a subtalar and ankle conversation. Right now we're having a knee conversation. It's like taking a golf club, and the head of the golf club's down here. You can spin it with your hand, but the club goes along for the ride. That doesn't mean the motion happened down at the golf. The head of the club just goes along for the ride. It's very similar. Where your foot is going to go along for the ride, but the motion is happening here. I'm not saying motion can't happen here. It's kind of hard for a competent. But I need you to see how the tibia is rolling. Now, let's take the first thing we learned today. Spin to your right, spin to your left. A side of a side. There is no right and left. There's a lateral and medial. Hey, right knee, spin laterally. Spin to the outside. Spin externally. That's how that works. Hey, right knee, spin medially. Spin internally. And then we have the mirror effect. Both knees spin laterally. Think of it like this. Those two doors, both open when they rotate in opposite directions globally. We would call both of those motions open and closed. Even though they're spinning two different ways global, they're spinning the same way locally. Makes sense? Right knee, external, lateral, right and left knee, bilateral. Internal, medial, it's kind of like the doors are closed. That looks like it's moving, and it is. Here's the hard part. Here's the hard part. The true practicality of our knee rotation is when we cut and plan. Changing directions. Guys, our knee, this is all practical stuff. I'm trying not to working outside of communication, but it should make, it's one of those things we don't really stop to think about very often. When we cut and plan, change direction, playing sports, activities, we're not going to cut and plant with a straight knee, with an extended knee, because then it would look like this. Our knee is going to be flexed. And the reason it's going to be flexed is that allows in this case, our knee extensors or quads to help my hip extensors push down into the ground with more force than my weight so that I can generate more friction so that ground reaction force can help me change my direction. If I have a straight leg, the only way I can push into the ground with more force is to just use my plantar flexors. That if my knees are straight, I can't push into the ground with more than my weight. I have to have my knee flexed so I have to drive my foot into the ground and change my direction. Does that make sense? Here's the big illusion. We name all of our joint motions. Good Lord. Just did puberty again. This too shall pass. You know what's good about bad days? Bad days make you appreciate good days. It's all good days. We name joint motions based off of the movements that are most likely to happen. Small pieces moving about big pieces. Reason lefty loosey and righty tighty work is because when you're undoing a hose, the small piece will always move about the big piece. But not necessarily in the big body. Sometimes we use big pieces about small pieces. First lecture I say the door always moves about the wall. So that's why we named them as such. But in our body, the wall can move about the door. And we have to call those changes the same thing, even though they don't look the same. So my point is, when we name these motions, it makes sense we're going to call this lateral and this medial because it's the smaller piece moving about the big piece. But we can have the big piece move about the small piece. So my point is this. If I was cutting and planting on my right leg and I did this, your instinct is to want to say that was medial or internal because you literally see like my femur and my whole knee coming inside. But that's lateral rotation of my right knee. Because look at the change in position. My right knee is laterally rotated. It went from not being rotated, flexed, but not being rotated, to my toes pointing laterally to my knee. Does that make sense? Bless you. In fact, if I would have hurt something in my knee, it would be on the inside because my knee is doing that. Medial or internal, lateral or external. Medial, internal, lateral, external. Does that make sense? Yes, sir. I'm still, I can use, and that's perfectly okay. This is weird. And so my job is to get us young confused. And I guarantee you, I've been playing class poker for a long time. You're not the only one. And there's several people in here going, thank God someone just asked to clarify. So my job is to try to put it in different ways. Okay? So what do we remember? Human motion. Human motion is just changing position, right? So let's think back to one of our questions that we have in our first test. If I start here and I finish here, you don't have to see it happen to know, well, if I started extended and I finished flexed, I had to have flexion. If I start off in anatomical and I end extended, I had to have extension. Okay. Let's apply that to this weird scenario where my right knee is in anatomical. Now my right knee is flexed, but it's not rotated. How do I know? Because Nothing but fancy props here, ladies and gentlemen. Grab stuff. Here's my femur. Here's my tibia. They're lined up, meaning my tibia is not rotated laterally, nor is my tibia rotated medially. Again. Still lined up in the transverse plane. If I have lateral rotation, notice that my tibia, my toes, the shaft of my golf club is looking out relative to my patella. My patella isn't part of my femur, but when I flex my knee, it gets hooked into that femoral groove. So it's a good landmark to use because my patella isn't going anywhere. So notice when I'm laterally rotated, my foot is facing out relative to my feet. My toes are looking on the outside. Okay. So if I start here and I do this, I say toes pointing out must be lateral rotation or external rotation. We're good so far. Now let's go with the illusion. You see it? Yeah. So what's happening is instead of doing this, I'm doing that. And it gets me to the same place. But our brains want to say, oh, I'm coming in. The femur might be coming in, but the change of motion between the femur and the tibia is out. Because this gets me to the same place as this. Very on top. Here to there. Gets me to the exact same place as I was here. I didn't move a thing. So how would I have to rotate my knee to go home? I'd have to internally rotate it to go home. It tells me I have to laterally rotate it when I left home. I'll do that one more time. Here to there. If I can't see it when there's the illusion, just lift it up. I have to do this to go back to where I started, showing me that I had to do this when I left. It's just I didn't have the tibia moving about the femur, I had the femur moving about the tibia. So it looks different. Better? Our brains, when we learn these motions, when you're introduced, and that's kind of what I see my job is. When you're introduced to these motions as freshmen, sophomores, high school, it's not that the people that taught you this were wrong. They only gave you lefty loosey, righty tighty. They only gave you, it looks like it's moving and it is. They only gave you how we name them. They didn't teach you that it can look different. But the change between the bones has to be called the same thing when they deviate the same way. Let's be honest. How many people were hoping that I described it a little bit better or a little bit different after? To be honest. Thank you all for being honest. Glad you asked that. It wasn't just you. This is no different. Even though we're going to lecture on it on Friday, guys, this is no different concept than saying this is external of the hip and this is external of the hip. It's the same concept. This is the same as this and that. This is the same as this. The reason it messes with you is because I just taught you, hey, hips spin laterally. But your brain imprints that anything on the left side that spins that same way must be lateral. Not if the socket does that. Here to there, is the same as here to there. Here to here is the same as here to there, because it gets me to the same place. So my job is not to overcomplicate things. It's to remind you we can't assume. We have to just, whoa, let me just make sure this is where I started. This is the position that I'm at when I started. This is my new position. Let me look at that new position and say, oh, those toes are pointing out. I'm laterally rotated. How do you go from being not rotated to being laterally rotated? You have to have lateral rotation to get there. You have to be externally rotated to get there. Grace, any emphasis from your perspective when you were learning this?
Yeah, I feel like just going over the practice with no machines and like feeling it for yourself. What's the best thing to do? Yeah, make a nice.
Just practice. All right. So for the knee, uniaxial. It's a modified hinge, which means that the majority of the motion is going to be in a sagittal plane, flexion, extension. Got no problem with that, right? That was first test. When the knee is unlocked or flexed, we can have some internal and lateral rotation. That can look like this, but it can also look like this. And that's what I was trying to teach you guys today. If you're willing and able, but let's stand up and try this out. Okay. And let's take our right leg forward. Flex your knee, flex your hip, put some weight on it. And it's as if you were going to plant and go to your left. But I'd like for you to rotate your knee and notice how your toes are pointing lateral to your patella. So in other words, bring your knee in. But for that to happen, your knee has to rotate out. Perfect. Perfect. You see how the toes are outside of your knee? Yeah. So like here's where your patella is, and notice how your toes are flat. This is rotating stress. Think of it like this. When we get into stretching, if you bend your neck to your right, you're going to feel a stretch on your left. Kind of common sense. Same concept applies here. When you do this, you feel tension on the inside of your knee because your knee is rotating out. You feel stress on the inside. Same concept. If I extend, I feel stretch on my front. If I flex, I feel stretch on my back. As I laterally rotate, I feel tension on the inside. Same concept. So on the test, we're going to have to be able to recognize medial and lateral rotation, but also lateral and medial rotation. Cool. See. Let me segue into, only because I think we're on a roll. So I'm going to go to hip rotation. I'm going to lecture more on the hip in terms of ball and socket, and blah, 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 but we're on a roll. So what I want you to notice is that I'm teaching the same thing. Left knee, lateral, medial. Left hip, lateral, medial. It's the same motions. just in a different place. Lateral, medial, lateral, medial. Lateral is the same as external. Medial is the same as internal. Hey, left hip, rotate out, rotate in. Okay? The illusions are the same as the knee. Left hip external,